The scream sliced through the evening like glass. It didn't float or fade, it caught in your throat and made your legs forget how to move. People turned their heads and kept walking, phones in hand and eyes trained forward, until it was just another sound that the city could swallow. But one person didn't keep walking. A single dad holding a small hand that trusted him with everything paused, listened again, and stepped toward the sound. Before this night ends, you will know him by name. Before this night ends, you'll know whether you would have kept walking, or turned. It was a winter evening that had lost its patience, cold, hurried, and already dark though the clock insisted it was barely past 6. The supermarket's glass doors hissed open and shut under the push and pull of people with nowhere to go but home. Omar adjusted the strap of the blue lunch bag on his shoulder and looked down at the 6-year-old girl whose fingers were wrapped around his. "Hold tight," he said, smiling because she was looking up at the automatic doors like they were magic. Tiny, soft, and fierce in her pink beanie, Noor didn't seem to notice the shiver in the air. She always trusted his warmth to finish the job the weather started. They were halfway to the car when it happened. The scream. It leapt from the concrete levels of the parking garage across the street, high and aching, a sound that cupped disaster and helpless fury in its hands and shook them. Omar stopped dead. Noor tugged his hand, puzzled, and then she heard it too. Her small face changed, as if she had heard a dog cry, a sound that demands you do something even if you don't know what. Around them, people moved like a river around a rock. A couple glanced in the direction of the garage and then sped up, the man half laughing like this was a scene to be changed, not lived. A delivery rider craned his neck, slowed, and then kept going, weighed down by his own urgent map of red dots and deadlines. Someone took out a phone, not to call, but to record, a reflex that felt like turning away while pretending you weren't. "Baba?" Noor whispered. Omar thought of how he'd told her, after her mother left a year ago, that they were a team. He'd meant it. Not a tired excuse. Not a slogan. A promise. He bent to her level so her eyes were steady on his. "We're okay," he said. "We're safe. And someone needs help." He glanced at the street that split them from the garage, then at the small backpack on Noor's shoulders. He could feel the thud of his heart like a fist on a door. He walked them to the curb, dug into his pocket, and pulled out the car keys. "Do you see our car? The blue one, 2 spaces in from the lamppost." She nodded. "Good. I'm going to put you inside, lock the doors, and I'm going to stand right outside where you can see me." Her lip trembled, and he hated that he couldn't make the world softer, hated that courage always asked for a toll. "I won't go far," he added. "I'll just see what's happening. If I lift my hand like this," he raised his palm, "you honk and don't stop until I come back. Deal?" She swallowed and nodded. Brave like a bead of water clinging to the edge of a leaf. He strapped her in, kissed her forehead through the beanie, and closed the door with a care that felt like a prayer. He locked the car, then left the keys on the hood where she could see them glint under the lamplight. He stood where he'd promised, where his shape filled her window, and called emergency services. His voice was steady. Years ago, after the divorce, he'd learned that being calm wasn't about feeling calm, it was about giving your fear somewhere to sit. Another scream. Closer this time. Omar cut across the street when the path was clear, nodded to himself like he'd already made the decision minutes ago, and entered the garage. The air carried a sour smell of exhaust and that empty echo that lives in concrete spaces. He followed the sound up the ramp, shoes scuffing, the kind of loud footsteps that announce, "I am coming, and I am not alone, even when you are." At the turn of the second level, he saw them. A young woman pressed against a pillar, her bag on the ground spilling its small life, keys, a lipstick snapped in two, a book with a bent corner. A man stood too close, one hand on the concrete near her shoulder, the other gripping her wrist like it belonged to him. She had a scratch on her cheek. Her voice was hoarse from trying to make herself bigger with sound. "Hey! Omar's voice filled the space with the weight of a father. Let go. The man turned, surprised to find his private cruelty interrupted. He was in that dangerous age where arrogance believes it is invincible simply because the world has not yet pressed hard enough. Mind your business, he said, adding a word he wouldn't have used if his mother were in the room, which she wasn't. This is my business, Omar said, keeping distance, palms open, showing nothing in his hands. He angled himself so that, if the man moved, he would have to move through Omar to reach the woman. He glanced back down the ramp, quick as a blink, and saw the neon flicker that told him the street and Noor and air were still where he'd left them. Let go, he repeated, and then, to the woman, are you hurt? Her eyes were wide and wet. He followed me, she said. The words rushed out like they'd been waiting for permission. He tried to grab me. I said, Omar's voice deepened, let go. He took one careful step closer. The police are on their way. He let the words settle in the man's ears like the first drops of a storm. The man scoffed but loosened his grip by almost nothing. You think anyone cares? You think, his bravado, suddenly thinner than he'd planned, faltered under Omar's unflinching stare. There was something solid there, something you learn when your child has nightmares about a door creaking or a shadow moving and you go anyway, every time, even if you are also afraid. From the corner of his eye, Omar registered movement, two teenagers at the edge of the ramp, doing the same math everyone else had done and calculating the cost of involvement. He wondered if they would later call this a scary thing or the time they watched someone be brave. Hey, he called to them without taking his eyes off the man. Can one of you grab a guard? Or hit the alarm by the stairwell? Please. The boy blinked, then nodded, as if someone had opened a door he hadn't noticed. He ran. The girl stayed, filming, yes, but also watching like her recording gave her courage to keep her feet there. Let her go, Omar said again, and this time he took a second step. The man pushed off the pillar, shoved the woman hard enough to make her stumble, and squared up. He was bigger than Omar by a gym membership and a youth that thought its tendons were promises. His fists rose, the ridiculous dance of them telegraphing every bad decision that had led to this corner. Omar lifted a hand, not in surrender but in authority. Look at me, he said quietly. You don't want to do this. Walk away while you can still tell yourself you're smart. He heard his own father in his voice and felt the odd little grief that comes when advice is a family heirloom. He took a breath that tasted like cold iron and added, because if you don't, I will make you stop. The sentence held something that had nothing to do with size. It held sleepless nights and lost jobs and the hollow ache of an apartment after a fight. It held the soft weight of a baby asleep on your chest when you are all they have and the engine won't start and you learn to ask strangers for help. It held every time the world had asked Omar to be more than he was ready to be and he had said yes, even if he had said it with shaking hands. The man's bravado peeled back. The sound of running feet echoed, a security guard appeared, breathless, hand on his radio. The teenager with him pointed. The guard's eyes narrowed. Sir, he called to the man. Step back now. It was enough. Not because the man believed he was wrong, but because, suddenly, he wasn't alone with his cruelty anymore. He sneered, spat at the ground near Omar's shoes to reclaim some scrap of power, and then turned and pounded down the ramp toward the street, where the night swallowed him like a lesson postponed but not erased. The woman slumped, the shape of panic dissolving and leaving the trembling behind. Omar moved toward her and stopped with a respectful gap. Are you hurt? He asked again. She shook her head and then nodded, as if the question was too big for one answer. Her wrist had a red band around it where the fingers had been. I'm okay, she said, and then ruined the sentence with a sob that made her hand fly to her mouth. Thank you. Everyone they looked. I thought, she couldn't finish. I know, Omar said softly. He didn't say that people are complicated, that fear makes cowards and survivors out of the same heart. He Didn't say that there were people who wanted to help but didn't know how to be first. He just stood there with her until her breath learned to be steady again. The guard took her statement, then Omar's, and the arrival of 2 officers put a neat frame around the scene. It would hold for tonight. He knew some frames splinter later. When they reached the street, Noor's breath ghosted the window where her forehead pressed, eyes round and unblinking. Omar lifted his hand and waved with all the ordinary easiness he could muster. He opened the car door, the warm little world inside returning to him like a thank you. Noor's cheeks were wet. She had been brave and quiet and as still as a small moon. "Are you okay?" Omar asked, because it mattered. She launched into him, arms around his neck, small fingers finding the back of his jacket like climbing rungs. "Baba," she whispered. "I was so scared." "I was scared too," he said, truth like a handrail. He looked over her shoulder at the woman, who stood on the sidewalk hugging her own elbows. The officers had finished. She glanced at him, gratitude raw as a scraped knee. She lifted her hand, unsure. He nodded. "Do you want me to walk you to your car?" he asked when Noor was buckled again. He kept the door open so Noor could see them. "We'll stay together." The woman nodded. Close up, he could see the pale line of an old scar just under her chin, the kind of story you don't tell on purpose. "My name is Alina," she said. "I don't know how to." "Hi, Alina," he said. "I'm Omar. This is Noor. You don't have to say anything." He meant it. They walked slowly, their footsteps 3 beats in an evening that had forgotten its tune, and when Alina got into her car and locked the doors, she exhaled like a person who had been underwater too long. She looked at him through the window, hand pressed to the glass in a thank you bigger than language. Back at home, after Noor had fallen asleep mid-story with her hand still holding his finger, Omar stood by the window and let the apartment be warm around him. He thought of Alina's face when help arrived. He thought too of the people who had hurried away, and of the teenagers, one running, one filming, both choosing a kind of involvement. He wondered if courage, like yawning, can be contagious. He hoped so. He poured himself tea he wouldn't finish, then sat at the kitchen table and wrote in a small notebook he kept for the days that felt like hinge points. Tonight, he wrote, don't walk past the sound of someone else's life. Be the noise that stops the hurt. The city woke up pretending nothing had happened, because that is how cities get things done. But stories ripple, even when their first splash is swallowed by traffic and emails and missed buses. Alina texted the number the officer had pressed into her hand. A support line, a counselor, a suggestion of a safety class the precinct held in the community center on Tuesdays. She stared at the words for a lawn. Last night I was angry with all the people who didn't stop. Today, I keep thinking about you. And her. She nodded at Noor. I don't want to be angry anymore. I want to be like, she hesitated, searching for the right shape. Like you did. Notice and move. I don't know that I did anything special, Omar said. I just couldn't picture explaining to Noor later that we heard someone and we kept walking. He shrugged, the movement small and honest. I guess I want her to think brave is normal. Not loud. Just normal. Alina swallowed. Brave as normal, she echoed. She wrote it in her phone as soon as she got in, as if it were a recipe she didn't want to lose. When stories grow legs, they wander. The teenager's video, remarkably steady, circulated online in their neighborhood chat groups, stripped of faces by the administrator who still wanted to show the shape of it. The conversation bloomed with all the things people say when they discover the mirror they didn't mean to hold. A teacher commented, maybe we teach this in school. Not just how to say no, but how to hear it from across a room. A retiree wrote, I walk with a whistle now, and I will blow it for anyone whose voice can't climb the stairwell. A security guard from a mall across town said, here's where the buttons are in my building. He dropped a map. Within 2 weeks, the community center had a new Tuesday habit. It wasn't just about self-defense. It was about roles. The timid learned to make helpful noise. The confident learned to be gentler with their certainty. One man said he realized he had always thought rescue looked like a movie scene where someone runs in and fixes everything with a punch. Now he practiced calling, practiced speaking in that voice that borrows authority from love, practiced standing in a doorway so someone could leave safely. These were small heroics, daily, and they fit better in real life. Alina started walking female coworkers to their cars after late shifts. At first it felt performative, like she was auditioning for a role, but the second time a man circled the lot slowly in a car with music too loud, she felt the steadiness of having practiced. Together, she told the woman, and the woman's shoulders dropped a little. They reached the car, keys ready, phone in hand with the emergency number half dialed. Nothing happened. That was the victory, a quiet parking lot. Not all victories are loud. One night, several weeks after the scream, Alina found herself on the same level of the same garage. She had avoided it on purpose for days, circling for a street spot until the pettiness of inconvenience felt too much like surrender. Now she parked, sat with the engine off, and listened. The concrete hummed its usual emptiness. The light flickered once, twice. She wasn't alone, and not just because a guard walked his loop nearby. She wasn't alone because she had learned how to carry the company of everyone who would stop if they heard it. She stepped out, head up. Bag strap wrapped across her chest like a sash. Her heart did the old thud, but it was a friendly rhythm now, a metronome keeping time. Across town, Omar was trying to make spaghetti taste new. Noor declared that grated cheese made it snow. They were midway through a kingdom of forks and sauce when a message arrived on his phone: "I crossed the garage tonight. I wasn't afraid. Thank you for teaching me brave as normal." He read it twice, then once aloud. Noor looked pleased, as if this compliment also belonged to her. "We're good at helping, Baba," she said, as if the sentence had been sitting in her mouth all day, waiting for the right moment. He nodded and felt his eyes sting in that way that made the kitchen light seem too bright. Spring came slowly and all at once, the way it always does. On a Saturday, the community center hosted a family fair for safety and neighborliness, two words that look awkward in fonts but fit perfectly in real life. Booths lined the basketball court. There was a station where kids practiced shouting, "Help," and laughing at how loud they were allowed to be. There was a table where you learned how to call emergency services with the kind of details that save minutes. There were flyers titled, "What to do if you hear a scream," with points that were simple: look, move, call, stand with. Alina manned the table where people wrote on sticky notes the last time they had helped someone and the last time someone had helped them. The board filled with small things: coffee paid for, a door held, a neighbor's car jump-started at midnight. Invisible threads, suddenly visible. She saw Omar arrive with Noor, who wore a cape made of a towel because she had declared herself, "Captain Listen." Alina laughed when she read the hand-lettered C and the felt-tip lightning bolt. "I like your cape," she said. "It tells the truth." Noor handed Alina a cookie she had iced herself, lopsided hearts drowning in sprinkles. "We came to see your board," Noor said. "We want to put one." She scribbled with serious concentration: "We heard someone and we didn't keep walking." The note looked like it might crumple from the pressure of her pencil, but it didn't. Alina pressed it to the board. For a moment, they stood there together, three people who would not have been together if a scream had gone unnoticed. You might be wondering if this is the part where a different kind of story starts, the kind with dates and laughter and two adults discovering a shape that fits both their hands. Maybe. Life does those side plots gently when the main story is about something else. For now, what mattered was that Alina and Omar had become part of each other's safety net, the kind that stretches under a community without anyone falling through. If they later found they wanted to walk further together, well, that would just be another brave and normal thing. As the fair wound down and the sun considered going home, the officer who had led that first session took the mic. She spoke without fuss. When you hear a scream, she said, you are not an audience. You are a cast. Every one of you has a line, even if it is only, I'm here. I see you. Help is coming. That line can change an ending. People applauded because it felt like a good place for hands to do something. Omar felt Noor's fingers slip into his, smaller and somehow stronger than before. Alina felt her heart settle in a way it hadn't since she moved to the city. She would still be careful. She would learn to forgive the part of her that would always glance back over her shoulder once, twice. But she wasn't going to live in the garage anymore. She was going to live in the kind of world they were building, one Tuesday at a time, one evening at a time, one decision at a time. Later that night, as you scroll in the quiet and the day's noise fades to a hum, you might remember the sound of that first scream and all the ways people didn't move. You might picture a single dad's steady hands and a little girl in a pink beanie. You might hear the sentence that sat like a cornerstone under the whole house they built, brave as normal. And you might ask yourself, as kindly as you can, if I hear someone tonight, someone in a stairwell, a parking lot, a crowded street, what will I do? If your answer is even a small step toward turning, then this story continues. Because the truth is simple and enormous, everyone ignored her screams, except the single dad who was walking with his daughter. And now, perhaps, you won't ignore them either.